Flavia to introduce our speaker.
Hello. All right, let's scoot up. All right, you can hear me. I'll just hi in Zoom land. Thanks for being with us as we get 2024 off to a very auspicious start. We have as our speaker tonight Adria Arko, Director of Advancement for the San Mateo County Resource Conservation District, or RCD for short. And I really want to tell you how our group came to invite a representative of our local RCD to come and speak. My partner, Carrie, and I live in Southern Oregon, and our focus these past couple of years has been to raise awareness about the benefits of composting versus the environmental damage that happens when food is wasted. Because in Oregon, we do not yet have anything similar to California's law, SB 1383, that became effective in 2022 to keep organics out of the landfills. So at the end of this past summer, our club was deliberating over which issues we would bring into our annual meeting with our local state representatives and our state senator. Because of my interest in that, I had attended a webinar profiling the inspirational work of some of the state's RCDs. I pitched that we include this issue of increasing support for RCDs to their attention, and we did that. And through that process, we suggested having someone from our local RCD come and speak to this group about the roles that it plays in water, wildlife, climate, agriculture, and fire. So, you know, a very short list, right? RCDs can be a great example of successful, constructive engagement with a government agency to address environmental issues. So here we are today. Please join me in welcoming Adria Arko to tell us about San Mateo County's Resource Conservation District.
Hi, everyone. I'll just work on sharing my screen for a second.
Oh, and Marshall, will you mute everybody?
See my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then I'll get started. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Adria Arko, and I've been with the San Mateo Resource Conservation District for almost 9 years. I was asked to cover a lot of different topics today, and so I'm going to kind of blow through it, and then I think there's going to be a lot of time for question and answer at the end. So to start off, I can't see you in the room, but typically I'd ask how many of you know about resource conservation districts, and typically very few people raise their hands. We are, what we like to say is the best kept secret. We are special districts, so like a school district or a fire district, we are government. We were formed in 1939 as the Soil Conservation Service to help farmers recover from the Dust Bowl. We were the first RCD that was formed in California. There's about 90 RCDs in California and hundreds across the United States. We serve as a local hub for conservation, connecting people to the resources that they need to protect our abundant natural resources. Soil, water, habitat, wildlife, forests. Fundamentally, we help people help the land, and we help people by helping the land. We are non-regulatory, and we work on public and private lands across property lines and landscapes. And we're really just formed to work in partnership, and literally everything we do is in partnership. So we work with landowners and land managers, people who grow our food, businesses, communities, agencies, and jurisdictions to support them with voluntary conservation. And we do that through education and outreach, educating people to empower them to protect and conserve our natural resources. Through technical assistance, we offer free non-regulatory conservation technical assistance, from identifying a weed to building a pond to recovering from wildfire. And much of our technical assistance work develops into on-the-ground projects. So we develop, plan, implement, and monitor restoration projects, like building a hedgerow on a farm, or restoring rivers and creeks, or improving hundreds of acres of forests and wetlands. And we serve San Mateo County. Most of the work that we do is in coastal San Mateo County, although we do work throughout the entire county. We have 5 program areas, although a majority of our work is multi-beneficial and touching on several of these programs. It's water, that's water quality and water conservation, climate, agriculture, forest health and fire resiliency, and wildlife. So one of the first topics I was asked to speak to was nature-based solutions. That's the majority of the work that we do. Nature-based solutions involve conserving, restoring, and better managing ecosystems to mitigate to or adapt to climate change. They've been recognized as a critical part of addressing the climate crisis by their potential to both sequester and store carbon, and also restore ecosystems to build resiliency. I'm just going to show some examples of the nature-based solutions we've done in San Mateo County. So the first is flooding. That's an issue. Hopefully you've all been to Pescadero. It's a lovely town on the coast, but it does experience destructive flooding. The work that we do is installing nature-based solutions that allow the creek to flood where it won't do damage and actually has benefits to wildlife. So restoring floodplain where the creek historically used to flood. And so this top picture, of course, there's a picture of the flooding. I believe that was just last year. And then the top picture is a restoration project that we did this last year to restore 5 acres of floodplain on a farm in Pescadero. So these nature-based solutions, they also store sediment in small amounts upstream, so it doesn't all end up downstream, filling up the creek channel and causing flooding. To most people, this work when you're in a creek just looks natural, but in fact, it's engineered features that we do that restore nature solutions to flooding. Drought. This is another issue that we deal with in San Mateo, and also just across the Western US. In coastal San Mateo County, we don't have an irrigation district. There's no snowpack. Everyone is pretty much drawing from the same small creeks and aquifers. The farmers, residents, visitors, wildlife are all kind of having their straws in the same creeks. When I started 9 years ago, it was the height of a really bad drought, and farmers and residents were trucking in water to just get by. So we have worked to develop water storage. This is a pond on a farm in San Gregorio. Both can hold rainwater, but is also filled during the winter months when water is abundant. And then the farm uses this water to irrigate during the summer when there's a higher demand on the creek. And this is good for farms. It's water security. It's good for fish that need a certain amount of water in the creek to survive. And it's good for people who are also relying on these creeks for their water. And also these ponds have been used and can be used for fire suppression when there is a wildfire. And wildfire, the CZU complex fire that we had just a few years ago affected farms and homes and parks in the southern part of the county. We've been partnering with residents and state and county parks to reduce the risk of catastrophic fire by restoring the historic land management practices that these forests evolved with over thousands of years and under the care of Native peoples. These projects also restore health to the forest. They reintroduce biodiversity, and they allow native trees more space to grow taller and stronger and sequester more carbon. This last year, we completed a 15-year impact report. it was the first in our 80+ year history impact report we've ever completed, to my knowledge. And I'll just share some highlights of what we've accomplished in the recent years. So between 2007 and 2022, we kept creeks from going dry during droughts, as much as doubling the amount of water in some cases, by conserving 228 acre feet of water annually and creating storage for 146 acre feet of agricultural and domestic water. To put that in context, I know we don't think about acre feet. It's a foot of water on an acre of land. And those savings represent roughly the amount of water that's used by half of the county's South Coast residents, or the amount of water used by a 165 acre farm. We also monitored water quality at 40 sites across the coast. I talked about forest health. So we improved 546 acres of forests in San Mateo County, improving the health of the forest while also reducing the risk of catastrophic wildfire. And we also help communities in the wildfire or urban interface create defensible space around their homes through our chipping program. So that was almost 2,000 homes in 19 communities. And many people don't know that San Mateo County is home to more than 40 threatened species. It's a biological hotspot. And our habitat program restores habitat for threatened and endangered species like San Francisco garter snake and coho salmon and mission blue butterfly. So we restored over 1,500 acres of habitat in San Mateo County. And we also removed 8 dams, enabling fish like steelhead and coho that are threatened and endangered to access 118 miles of creek that they had been blocked off from. The next topic is nature-based solutions in an agricultural context. So I was asked to highlight our carbon farming program. And this is, nature-based solutions in farming and ranching that enhance the ability of farms to draw down and store carbon in plants and soils. So carbon farming practices have been utilized for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's only recently that their contribution to climate change mitigation has been highlighted. These practices include a suite of practices that basically ensure that the soil is covered, that they reduce soil disturbance, restore soil health through additional things like compost, and also the planting of perennial plants, be that grasslands in a rangeland setting or woody species that maybe make up a hedgerow or a windbreak. And while the potential for carbon sequestration is certainly wonderful, equally important are the ecosystem benefits that these practices provide. From water quality to storing more water in soils, habitat for pollinators and wildlife, integrated pest management, better forage for cattle and wildlife, reducing soil erosion, improving irrigation efficiency, and reducing soil compaction. So our carbon farming program develops tailored conservation and carbon farm plans and helps farmers access the resources that they need, be that financial or kind of just technical assistance, to transition to these regenerative practices. In the last several years, we've developed 18 carbon farm plans, and we've helped 28 farmers install practices. And that has sequestered the equivalent of emissions from driving a car over 16 million miles. And I will say that our office is located in Half Moon Bay. All RCDs work in partnership with our federal counterpart, which is the United States Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service. So they are kind of our sister agency, and we have a shared office in Half Moon Bay, and so much of this work is done in partnership with them. And then I was also asked to speak to how is the county supporting this carbon farming work? And there's two kind of exciting initiatives that we've partnered with the county on in the last couple years that I thought would be interesting to you. So a few years ago, San Mateo County developed and passed a new community climate action plan. And the state encourages cities and counties to develop these climate action plans to show how they plan to reduce emissions in their jurisdictions to comply with the state's ambitious climate goals. The plan in San Mateo County and most other places is oriented around reducing greenhouse gas emissions from building, energy, transportation, and solid waste management. And we in San Mateo County took a novel approach with the county by including working lands in a meaningful way. The RCD worked with many farmers and ranchers and Carbon Cycle Institute to develop scenarios of carbon farming adoption, which showed that with increased adoption at a moderate rate, agriculture in San Mateo County can contribute significantly to the climate goals of the county and also be carbon neutral by 2030. So the RCD led a stakeholder engagement process, working with farmers and ranchers and other stakeholders, because the plan is one thing, but the strategies of how to implement that plan are the most important. And the strategies that were developed by producers include needing financial assistance to do these practices, technical assistance, research and education, development of supporting infrastructure like access to equipment, reducing permitting barriers and conserving agricultural lands. And I'm going to talk more about the funding and the technical assistance. And I just want to note that this is not a regulatory document. The RCD and the county were really deliberate, that the purpose of this plan is focused on supporting farmers who are interested in utilizing climate beneficial practices, but not requiring that of farmers, because each farm is unique, has different management practices. So the hope is now that it's been passed by the Board of Supervisors, the plan can be utilized to secure resources to implement these practices, do research, and offer more assistance to our farmers. And then the other program that has been really exciting is, like Flavia was alluding to, 1383. So we've partnered with the county and all cities in San Mateo County to support local farms and carbon farming through a new waste reduction mandate. 1383, California's short-lived climate pollutant reduction law, was passed in 2016, and implementation has been phasing in over the last few years. The goal of the law is to reduce organics being sent to the landfills to reduce methane emissions and therefore mitigate climate change. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, and food waste accounts for a large part of that, and it's roughly 20% in California of our methane emissions. And this law takes a multi-pronged approach and places many new requirements on cities and counties. It includes requirements to offer collection services to residences and businesses, to collect food and green waste, to send to compost facilities, recovery of edible food that is in good quality to redistribute to those in need, education and outreach about the new law and importance of managing food waste, and also compliance and enforcement actions for people that are not complying with these requirements. And lastly, it requires that cities and counties procure organic products, including compost. And that the reason for this is to kind of strengthen the compost economy, to kickstart it, so that there is more green waste going into compost, there's more compost coming out of these facilities. So, we saw this as an opportunity to meet some of the kind of financial and technical assistance barriers that farmers identified in the climate action plan, for scaling carbon farming practices. Compost is one of the easiest carbon farming practices to adopt, but it's also really expensive. Especially in San Mateo County, we don't have a facility that is nearby, so you have to haul that compost, and spreading costs can nearly double the cost of the compost itself. And those additional costs have been enough of a barrier for farmers who have expressed interest in using compost to not use it because of the cost is so expensive. So this seemed like a really good opportunity to scale this practice in the county while also helping local jurisdictions with their 1383 compliance. Our goals in the program were to offer financial assistance to farmers using high quality compost. And I can talk more about compost issues and quality later on if we have time. And to help farmers who haven't used compost before integrate this new practice into their management by offering soil testing and technical assistance. We're helping the jurisdictions by identifying potential projects, by managing the compost purchasing and spreading, and by leveraging state and federal funding to make their local contributions go further. So instead of Redwood City needing to figure out where all this compost that they have to buy is going to go and trying to, make individual relationships with each of the farmers, we're acting as that conservation hub where they are partnering with us and we are doing that work for them. So far, we've helped 27 farms and we are partnering with the county and every city within San Mateo County on this program. And this has been a really innovative kind of win-win approach that's being replicated in other counties. So I wanted to talk about how this work is getting done. So I mentioned that we are government, and despite being a local government agency, only 1% of our budget is funded via taxes. So we operate like a nonprofit. In the last 15 years, we've been able to bring in over $52 million to invest in local conservation and resiliency projects in San Mateo County, to implement hundreds of projects and to help thousands of people. And then I wanted to wrap up to share opportunities to engage and support the RCD. So if you haven't already, you can sign up for our newsletter or follow us on social media. I can share a link to the newsletter sign up, and you'll find opportunities to attend events. And although we don't have that many volunteer opportunities, we do have some, one of which is these volunteers pictured here. It's a First Flush event. It's a community science water quality testing event during the first rains of the year. We also, we help people help the land, and you can help us find those opportunities to protect natural resources by connecting us with your communities. We don't have a marketing or communications team, so most people hear about us via word of mouth, and that's kind of how projects get started and this conservation work happens on the ground. Please only put organics in your compost bins to support our compost program. Anything that is not compostable, like plastic, even some compostable bags, ends up in the compost that we put on our farms and on our gardens. And you can help our compost program by doing what you can to keep the organic waste stream clean. You can help support the local food system by supporting local farms. Our farmers are stewards of thousands of acres in San Mateo County, and they need your support to continue to do that work. And then if you can help, and if you are able, you can donate to the RCD. We're pretty good at getting funding for large restoration projects. It's a lot harder to fund the technical assistance and the outreach and educational work that we're doing. That's really the backbone of the organization. And we do rely on those individual donations to help us do that work. So that is what I had to share. This is my email address if you want to reach out with any questions, but I'm also here and I think we have some time to answer questions as well. And then we have Facebook and Instagram for those of you that are on social media. And we post updates about our projects and events and stuff like that if you want to learn more. I can't hear anything.
Okay, can you hear it now?
Can you-
Yes.
All right, let me ask the question again. Okay, you mentioned only putting organic materials in the green bin. And I'm gonna ask the dumb question of, okay, is that only organic, like produce or organic material? Like,
Yeah, that is organic material. So that includes yard waste, food waste, depending on, you know, you can even put like paper towels and anything that's kind of made of organic material can be composted. But when we were, a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from farmers is not only is the compost cost high, but the quality is poor, and they care for their land and they don't want to spread microplastics on their farms. And so we toured a lot of facilities, compost facilities, to when we were putting this program together. And despite their best work to keep the trash out of the compost, the only way it's really gonna not be composted is for the people that are putting material in the green bins to keep that non-compostable stuff out of there. But there's glass, there's plastic, all types of stuff that you find in the compost.
okay, that makes a lot more sense now. Okay, I see Gail, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, I would mention that I've noticed in dealing with people who come to do helper tasks that many people in San Mateo County do not know anything about what goes in which bin. And there's a tremendous need for public education, like TV spots,
It is.
radio spots. And I find that there's just an abundance of ignorance and hardly anybody knows what to do. So that would be an area that we could all push for.
I agree with you. There's a lot of need there.
Oh, she needs to get off. She needs to stop
Right,
sharing.
right.
Okay.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes, go ahead, please. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. And Flavia?
Okay, so Adria, did you want to finish your answer? You said you agree with Gail that it's difficult for many people to understand what goes in the bins? Is that what the question is?
Yeah, but I agree, we have to do more work.
Okay. Yeah, education is always gonna be part of the formula. So my question is, your title is Director of Advancement, and I wanted to ask if you could explain what your charter is in that title, and also how do you decide what your priorities are? Because I asked you before, like, will you be spending more?
Sorry that,
So
Marshall,
how
I
do you
think you
decide your
muted.
priorities? Go ahead.
Sorry, you, it was muted for a second, so I missed the last part of that question.
Okay, my question was, how do you decide your priorities in how you allocate your department's resources? Because they're all important priorities, so how do you decide those things?
So that was my second.
Okay, yeah, so I am relatively new to this role. I mentioned that I've been at the RCD for almost 9 years, and the majority of that time I was kind of building and managing our agricultural program. And then this last year moved into this new role of director of advancement. And in that role, I am tasked with kind of diversifying our funding sources because our business model, just being a grant funded organization, is challenging, and also kind of identifying and creating kind of strategic partnerships, and also some communications there, just, you know, like helping people understand that we're here and doing this work. And then that next part of the question about kind of allocation of resources, we have a strategic plan. So we follow that. But Flavia, when you and I were talking earlier in preparation for this, you kind of specifically mentioned, you know, are we given, you know, this focus from the kind of last IPCC, you know, climate summit, or on methane? Are we going to kind of double down and focus on that? And my response was that the one that methane isn't a terribly huge issue beyond the food waste in San Mateo County, just because of the type of agriculture that we have, but that also I think we all struggle at the organization because we're also passionate about this work, and because we see how interconnected all of this work is. And so our work on water conservation is very closely tied to the agricultural work, which is very closely tied to soil health, and climate kind of mitigation. There's, you know, community resiliency is so closely tied to the kind of biodiversity issues that this world is facing. And so I said that we would not just take all of our resources and focus only on carbon sequestration, because biodiversity is part of that, because adapting to climate change is part of that. And so the way we work is we're a local organization that is driven by local priorities. And so our priorities of water conservation and climate resiliency and agricultural support and forest health, all of that comes from the communities that we're serving. And so unless those change drastically, I think that like we'll kind of continue in those program areas that we have. And then being grant funded, you know, a lot of what we can do is determined by the amount of funding that we can get to do those projects.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana here. I just wanted, I was surprised to hear that composting was so expensive, because I did have the impression that farmers could replace fertilizer with compost, which to me would be much less expensive. So I was kind of surprised. So can compost not replace fertilizing?
For farmers that are using fertilizer, a lot of farms have been managed in the same way, in some cases for generations, and it is a big risk to take on a new practice. That's your livelihood. And so most of what you see is not a full replacement of fertilizer, but a kind of transition, a reduced amount of fertilizer application in partnership with a compost application. In some places, it really pencils out. In San Mateo County, our compost is coming from counties away. And everything is more expensive in San Mateo County. Compared to, you know, a large agricultural area, even just Salinas or, you know, Fresno. And then in a lot of cases, our agricultural industry is diverse, but not very big, especially compared to some of those kind of larger agricultural counties. And our large farms are small farms compared to state and kind of national averages. And many people, you know, envision like, oh, well, you're a farmer, make your own compost, you have the land. But our farms, they're not on that much land. And we're asking them to build water storage for drought. We're asking them to build housing for them, for farmers and for farm workers. They need infrastructure. They need and storage places. And so when you kind of add all of this stuff up, the amount of acreage to farm gets smaller and smaller, and you have to have a certain amount of input to get the output. And so a lot of our farms don't have much enough stuff to generate the amount of compost that they would need to replace the fertilizer. So it's much more complex than one it would seem. So I guess in short, yes, you can replace fertilizer with compost. Many farms do that, but it's not like a very quick transition, especially for farmers who haven't been using compost as part of their management practices. And the kind of financial economic picture in San Mateo County is a little bit more complex than in other areas where land is abundant and it's less expensive to do things.
Right. Well, Sherry?
Yes, I was interested in the very first slide, I think it was, where it showed the old Resource Conservation District and the old trucks, and at the bottom it said, I believe, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Do you actually report to USDA? Do you have to fill out forms to you know, inform other departments of your performance and activities?
No, we don't. So we're an independent special district. So we don't report to anyone. We're an entity of the state. So we're written in to you know, state law. It creates us, but we do work independently. And we work in partnership with the USDA. So we share an office and we share a truck and we deliver a lot of our services in partnership. We certainly leverage each other's resources. But we are partners in just that. We don't report to them unless they are funding a project. We get a grant from them, then just like any other grant, we report to them for that specific project.
Jim?
Hi, this is Jim, and question, I've been led to believe that Recology, which services both San Francisco and San Mateo County, has kind of an advanced process for dealing with compost and process it in a way that there's no methane released as a result of it. In contrast to if I put compost in my backyard, or compost in my backyard, I will still get methane released. So I guess maybe I'd like the clarification, is the Recology approach more advanced, or is it not really what I've been led to believe?
I think it probably is more advanced. Composting is, you have to, it's a recipe. You have to have the right input and the right conditions. And if you don't get a product that is desirable, but also it can lead to increased of just natural emissions from the decomposition. The large compost facilities like Recology, they've got that down to a science. That's their business. So they are monitoring temperature, they're monitoring moisture, they're, you know, monitoring the inputs. to create a compost as efficiently as they can. Because of that, you know, I don't know about their specific technology that they're touting, but just because of that, and of following that recipe, because that's their business, I do believe that it's probably a more efficient and less, resulting in less emissions.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I have a question. Whether San Mateo County has a plan that they try and target in 5 years or whatever time to reduce emission or composting, and whether you guys are on target on that?
Yes, so that is their climate action plan, their community climate action plan that I was mentioning, that we are gonna help develop the working lands component, but there is also a component about waste management, and also electrifying businesses and residences, and reducing transportation. So there is a person at San Mateo County who's responsible for implementing that plan and tracking progress. I can't tell you what the status of that is in terms of like metrics of their goal, but they're certainly on top of it.
Okay, and this is Susie again. I want to go back to Jim's question, talking about Recology and their program they're doing. Is that the source of the farmers where they're getting the compost? Is that from the Recology group, or are they getting it from somewhere else?
We offer a menu to farmers, and we work with them to pick the compost that best meets their needs, in terms of carbon to nitrogen ratio, cost, spreading requirements, and stuff like that. So we're not just working with Recology.
And we know you've got mushroom farms in Half Moon Bay. Is that a good source of compost?
We are not using that as compost. The kind of product of that is a mushroom substrate block. And the compost that farmers need is like a fully processed compost that's more fine and can be spread across a field.
Okay. Anybody else got it? Okay, hang on, Leslie.
So I understand that you guys want the company, corporation, whatever else, to reduce electricity use, whatever else. And the thing I thought about that is that we're trying to get off the electric grid so that we don't have power outage. If you do accomplish that, where you're going to be electrified things such that, would that cause another problem for them? As far as like, if they don't have enough electricity, will they run out of electricity when they need it to use?
I think I missed the first part of that question, but we're not really operating. We're working in natural resources, so we're not really working in electrification. That's the county that's managing that part of the climate action plan. So I don't know that I can speak to that, but maybe I just missed the first part of the question and how it applies to us.
All right, and I just want to end with, we mentioned earlier about visiting with our legislators, and I want to reiterate that when we talked to Senator Josh Becker and Assemblyman Mark Berman, we had very positive responses of, oh, we love the RCD. And when we brought up the fact that you guys need dedicated funding, they both kind of went, oh. And so now we've planted ideas in their head, and we are going to be asking them to follow up on that. Because you guys are a special district, so you need to get some dedicated funding. Now, so my last question for you is, okay, wishes, money is not a question any longer because you got the funding. What's the what's the one thing the RCD would really like to do if the money was there?
Wow, that's such a hard question. I think, our focus right now has been restoration. Restoring the function and health of our watersheds, by doing these large scale projects, restoring the floodplain, restoring the creeks, restoring wetlands, the forest, roads, all of these things. And our goal is just to focus on stewardship. So, you know, people who manage land, helping them to steward those lands. I know, like, so if we had all the money, we would do the restoration and then just focus on that stewardship part. But I think that kind of the kind of wish list golden project is probably going to be different for each program area, program manager. When you're out in the field, kind of like, oh, I really want to do that one. But in terms of funding, we're just like, our goal is just to like fund a few staff positions fully, so we're not so reliant on grants.
Well, we'll see if we can do a little, shoving around with at least our own local legislators to say, yes, let's get some dedicated funding heading your way so that you guys can keep doing the great work you're doing. And we really appreciate having you tonight.
Thank you so much for the invite. And please feel free to reach out, and I will put in the chat maybe the link for our newsletter.
Oh, yes, and I would encourage everybody, the RCD has a marvelous newsletter. I've been on your